Mic check, 1 2. Mic check, 1 2. Hello, Rancheroos. It is time for the RanchCast. Well, a surprise RanchCast. So this morning, I had a ton of issues with my audio. I finally got that settled this afternoon. Had a chance to test it out, make sure it worked. But I wanted to make sure, since it is late in the afternoon, it's a Friday afternoon, you all have stuff you want to do with your families. I had an interview this morning with Paul Bruce, who is one of the organizers of Observe Conference. He and I are both big observability fans in this space, and just wanted to share our conversation with you this morning. So I will do that now, show a couple of links to you, and then I will see you all next week on the RanchCast.
So I'm here today with Paul Bruce. Paul Bruce is one of the organizers of Observe 2020. How are you doing today, Paul?
Doing well, Jason. How are you doing? All things being equal?
All things considered, pretty well. I'm here in my basement bunker office. I've got my life straw and my canned goods down here, along with my 70 pounds of toilet paper.
Yep. I did the same thing. I was like, hey, I need a new desk. Bad time to buy a desk, as it turns out. IKEAs are closed. They're closed. But thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure listening to the RanchCast, and then also some of the things that are coming out of the OTEL, like Tell Me More, and a number of things that, wherever we are, whatever's going on, we still have to prevail, right? We still have to keep going on. So it's great to see that people are still highly virtual. and glad to be on the show.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. So tell me about Observe 2020. Tell me about the process of going from being a live conference in Boston to now being a worldwide virtual conference.
Sure. So let me start with what Observe 2020 is. So Observe 2020, the first thing, you can go to it online by going to observe2020.io. But it's a conference that is a grassroots sort of upbringing that I wanted to make sure that the topic of observability got a lot more light in definitely this year. For the past couple of years, people have been starting to realize that, monitoring in and of itself, or trying to chase down a really complicated problem by just parsing logs and doing all this kind of manual work isn't really the best approach in terms of, reducing mean time to resolution or recovery, in terms of figuring out why maybe something isn't as resilient as it's supposed to be, and to really a lack of visibility over clear and useful signals, not just at the technical level when it comes to like distributed systems, but also at the business level, right? That these pieces of telemetry, if your system isn't emitting them and all you're looking at is like raw metrics, you get a very impartial view of what might be going on at a systems level, but also how it impacts the business. And so Observe 2020 was supposed to be a Boston-based conference. It's still happening. It's virtual now. It's on April 6th, and it's basically $50 a ticket. Now there are some other discounts too, like for students, for folks in the underrepresented tech communities. But generally speaking, it's like, hey, if you're going to be in place anyway, right, for various reasons, why not just have this playing on the side? It's an entire day of talks, presentations, 20-minute presentations. We're still figuring out how to do the workshop stuff virtually. But the 20-minute presentations are coming from everybody from, Liz Fong-Jones is keynoting. We've also got a few folks from our local community like Toast. We've got folks from Signal FX and Splunk. Essentially, there is, if we step back and we think about what Open Telemetry is, it's a Cloud Native Computing Foundation project that is a merger of two projects that have been going on for quite a while, Open Tracing and Open Census. Open Tracing essentially makes it very easy to embed and inject traceability throughout your stack from system to system. And if you think about these complex distributed systems, you might be calling upwards of dozens of different services, and the chain gets really long. So how exactly do you figure out if a particular set of requests, maybe from a web app or a mobile app, are being impacted in a reliability manner or getting stuck? Where exactly are they getting stuck, right? And more importantly, which requests are chained together, right? It's one thing to be able to see that something has occurred, but asking the question why gets really tricky when you distribute all your systems. So that's what Open Tracing was doing. Similar along the lines of like Jaeger, and people are used to throwing their stats up into like Prometheus to kind of figure this out. Well, Open Telemetry is different. And I'm not a spokesperson for that at all. I'm just a nerd. Like, as you can tell, I love my Zelda. I love my video games. I also really detest systems that are very hard to diagnose and manage. And so in the DevOps space, I'm also one of the community organizers of Boston DevOps Meetup and of DevOps Days Boston for the past couple of years. What I find is that a lot of people get the notion of observability, but how to go about doing that in a manner where you don't have to literally rip and replace code just because you want to maybe switch out the back end of where you're storing it, or maybe a vendor product providing value on top. That gets really tricky. So one of the main value props that I see that Open Telemetry brings is it kind of, evergreen is a tough word, but it sort of vendor proofs you to a certain degree, because the lines of code that you're putting in your services to say, hey, this metric is important, a queue length or a retry count, some critical business metric that says, yes, they indeed completed the entire technical stack, and now we get to go back to the web app and say successful. Those kind of long and complex distributed transactions, what they used to call distributed transactions, long-running transactions. When you put that code, when you connect OTel into your code, right, you can swap out the backends as necessary. And not to get too detailed, but the point is, it makes it so that you can do that to your code and you don't have to constantly revise the way you're emitting the telemetry and the metrics from your code. You can then turn around and stream those pieces of information to not just a backend or a vendor, but potentially multiple vendors. So in this time where we're seeing a lot more pressure on virtual systems than we have, I think it's really useful to remember, certainly as a DevOps team, certainly as an organization that wants to improve the way they do things, and certainly as a developer, right? It's kind of our responsibility to make sure that the systems we're building not only do the job today, but also are sort of right fit for changes that might occur, whether it's at the organizational level or at the team level, in terms of the technologies we use, the processes we use, and also the people that are rotating through our crew. So I see OpenTelemetry as a huge opportunity to do that, similar to the way that like the Open API spec for APIs is a vendor agnostic specification of how to go about and do that. Same thing if anybody's familiar with the way that you might write web tests for Selenium, right? Selenium is now considered more of an implementation specific version of what we have now as committed to the W3C for WebDriver. WebDriver is the now standard and the protocol and the semantics for how to go about and do that. There is a standard. And when there's a standard, we can build awesome stuff on top of that, right? Otherwise, we don't know how long this thing is going to last, like a particular homegrown way of doing tracing is going to last. And especially things that are so embedded. I've seen a lot of Fortune 100s that have taken on the tracing thing many, many years ago, and they've got all this wiry code, and now they have to manage the versions, and version maintenance is a nightmare across distributed systems. So the OpenTelemetry project is really taking a step forward in terms of being able to make it easy for us to embed code that emits proper visibility into what's going on, but also in general, Observe 2020, like I said, is sort of a grassroots community thing. I've got a number of organizers from my community, and we just want to do really good stuff for the community, right? And for better or for worse, always got to look at silver lining. As it turns out, now this can be a global conference. It's not just about Boston, right? It's about anybody who wants to join can. So it'll start at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard. I'm going to keep the schedule that we have for the physical event because that's what was communicated out to a lot of people. But that also allows people to join up, on the West Coast at about noon our time. I'm also going to be providing those, of course, the videos afterwards to everybody who paid, and then eventually moving them out a couple months from now, hoping to work with the CNCF and a number of vendors like Lightstep and Honeycomb that are contributors and sponsors, amongst many others, to be able to distribute that out to a wider audience.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. As a guy who was a developer for, I don't know, more than a decade of my career, hardcore doing distributed systems development and tier development, that being on call, that the 2 a.m. everything's down and we have no idea why. I've been experimenting with open tracing and open telemetry. Having the tooling to be able to do something about that is huge. I'm developing, some of our consulting practices around, hey, how do I get started from zero, both from the operation side for how to digest all the tracing that's being emitted, but also how to, as a developer, instrument my code in such a way that makes this more useful. So I'm definitely excited for what you're all doing. I'm excited for what this community brings. I went through the entire open practitioner or the observability practitioner summit at KubeCon. It's the perfect time to be getting into this space to not only help your business, but help those in your business do their jobs better.
Yeah, and exactly. And if you think about the way that that the IT landscape is now, right, at your organization, whatever that might be, you've got a ton of existing, maybe legacy apps, probably some old school services. Now you've got a bunch of RESTful APIs. You've got a ton of apps that your organization has to support as part of their portfolio to make money, right, amongst other things, or to make that work for them. And so that's what's out there already. And who's going to go about the process of like re-instrumenting their code? Well, it depends, right? I think the first step is to actually come to Observe, listen to some of the talks, because it's not just about hyper-technical getting started. There's also a ton of how I think it's, I think there's a talk around IoT streams and how to measure and instrument those. There's also another fellow that is talking about, providing the business value conversation around observability. And I think that's really important because you cannot make decisions on your own as an individual contributor, as a team, that impact the team, right? It's not fair to the rest of the team to just start implementing a new package off to the side without at least kind of like peer reviewing it first and going like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Well, so great, that's great and all, but then it has to be supported by the whole team. So the first way that I would think when you are done with the conference and you bring it back to your work, your office, your day-to-day job, is to look around for essentially systems that are easy to change, that have very easy deployment models or things that you can.
Oh, look at that. I inadvertently hit the end of the interview. I will post the whole interview later today. If you want to learn more about the observability conference, you can go to observe2020.io. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to actually hit the exit there. I fat fingered a key while I was adjusting some audio settings, but I'll put the full link to the interview up shortly. In addition to that, if you want to find out more, observe2020.io, as well as following the O11Y 2020 Twitter feed to find out more about what's happening here. Full disclosure, I'm not speaking at this conference. I was accepted to speak there. I have family commitments that I have to attend to, but I think this is a really important topic, and I think that it's something that everybody who's doing distributed systems work should be involved in. So with that being said, I'm gonna let you all go since it is Friday evening. I will post the unedited interview up on YouTube to let you all check it out. All right. So thank you all again for joining me this afternoon. I will see you next week, and we'll continue automating all the things. So see you in the next video.